Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me tell you something. God doesn't need you. He wants you. And that right there, that should shake you up and set you free at the same time that God doesn't need you, but he wants you. That's a statement that holds a lot of weight if you really take the time to think about it. Too often, people walk around thinking that their relationship with God is transactional, like he depends on them to complete his work, to validate his existence, or to prove his power. But God was God before we ever showed up, and he will be God long after we're gone. He is self-sufficient, all-powerful, and completely in control. There is nothing we could give him that he doesn't already have. He doesn't need our help to keep the universe running. He doesn't need our worship to stay God. He doesn't need our service to fulfill his plans. But despite all of that, he still wants us. And that should change the way we see everything, and then think about it. When you need something, it means you're lacking in some way. It means there's a void that has to be filled. But God lacks nothing. He is complete all by himself. He doesn't call us to him because he's desperate, because he's lonely, or because he requires validation. No, he calls us to him because he desires a relationship with us. That's a whole different level of love. He doesn't love us out of obligation or necessity. He loves us because it's in his very nature to love. He loves us because he created us, and he wants us to experience the fullness of what life with him truly means. And when we start to grasp that truth, it should shake off the pressure we put on ourselves to earn his love. Some people walk through life believing they have to check all the right boxes, say all the right things, and be perfectly righteous in order for God to accept them. They treat their relationship with him like a job application, trying to present the best version of themselves so he will take notice and give them a chance. But the truth is, God already knows everything about us, the good, the bad, and the parts we don't want anyone to see. And still, he wants us. He's not waiting for us to reach some level of perfection before he embraces us. He's not demanding that we prove our worth before he extends his grace. He's already chosen us, already loved us, already made a way for us to come to him, just as we are. And then this understanding should also change the way we respond to God. When someone needs you, you can feel burdened by the obligation to be there for them. But when someone truly wants you, it's an invitation, not a requirement. God's love isn't forced on us. He doesn't demand our obedience like a dictator. He simply offers us the opportunity to walk with him, to trust him, to be loved by him fully and completely. It's not about duty, it's about desire. He desires us in a way that is pure, unchanging, and unlike anything this world can offer. God's love is not based on your perfection, but on his grace. This is one of the most freeing truths anyone can ever understand. Too many people walk around carrying the weight of their mistakes, feeling like they have to work their way back into God's good graces. They think that if they pray enough, do enough good deeds, or stay away from sin long enough, they can somehow earn his love. But God's love was never something to be earned in the first place. It is given freely, not because of who we are, but because of who he is. His grace is not a reward for the righteous, but a gift for the undeserving, which includes all of you. God's love, perfection. None of us would stand a chance. The Bible makes it clear that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. There isn't a single person who has lived a flawless life, except for Jesus. And yet, God continues to pour out his love, not because we have proven ourselves worthy, but because his grace covers what we could never fix on our own. His grace is what steps in when our efforts fall short. It is what picks us up when we stumble, what forgives us when we fail, and what reminds us that our identity is not in our mistakes, but in his mercy. And on grace means that God loves you at your worst just as much as he loves you at your best. He doesn't measure his love based on your performance. He doesn't withdraw it when you fail or increase it when you succeed. His love is constant, unwavering, and not dependent on your ability to meet an impossible standard. Some people struggle with this concept because they've only ever experienced conditional love from others' love that came with strings attached, love that had to be maintained by good behavior, love that could be lost if they made too many mistakes. But God doesn't love like people do. His love is not fragile or fleeting. It is rooted in his unchanging nature, not in our ever-changing actions. Understanding this truth should change the way we approach God. Instead of hiding in shame when we mess up, we should run toward Him, knowing that His grace is always available. Instead of living in fear of losing His love, we should rest in the confidence that nothing can separate us from it. This doesn't mean we take His grace for granted or use it as an excuse to do whatever we want. It means we live in gratitude, knowing that we are loved beyond measure despite our flaws. It means we stop striving to be perfect and start leaning on the one who will drop what He is. It means we let go of the idea that we have to perform for God's approval and instead accept the truth that we are already fully known, fully loved, and fully covered by His grace. Stop running and come as you are. God is ready for you. So many people spend their lives running whether they realize it or not. Running from their past, running from their pain, running from the call that's been on their heart for years. They convince themselves they aren't ready, that they need to clean themselves up first, that they need to figure out all the answers before they can step toward God. But the truth is, God isn't asking for the polished, perfected version of you. He's calling you just as you are, in the middle of your mess, in the middle of your questions, in the middle of your brokenness. The idea that you have to be flawless before you approach God is one of the biggest lies the enemy has ever told. And look at the people God used throughout history. Moses had a speech problem and doubted himself. David was a shepherd boy before he became a king and made plenty of mistakes along the way. Paul was literally persecuting Christians before God transformed his life and made him one of the greatest apostles of all time. None of them were perfect. None of them had it all figured out, but that didn't stop God from calling them, equipping them, and using them. What makes you think He can't do the same for you? The only thing standing between you and the life God has for you is your willingness to surrender, to stop running, and to let Him do the work in you. And some people run because they are afraid. Afraid that God will ask them to do something too big, too hard, too uncomfortable. Afraid that if they step into His will, they will have to give up things they aren't ready to let go of. Afraid that they aren't good enough to be used by Him. But here's the thing, God doesn't call the qualified, He qualifies the called. He isn't waiting for you to get stronger. He wants to be your strength. He isn't expecting you to have all the answers. He wants you to trust that He already does. He isn't asking you to be perfect. He's asking you to be willing, and others run, because they carry shame. The enemy lies about your worth, but God's desire for you is unshakable. One of the biggest tactics of the enemy is deception. He doesn't need to destroy you outright. He just needs to make you believe that you are worthless, forgotten, or too broken to be used by God. If he can get you to doubt your value, he knows you will start living beneath the purpose God has for you. He whispers lies that tell you you're not good enough, that you've made too many mistakes, that God has better things to do than care about you. But none of that is true. God's word says that you are fearfully and wonderfully made, that He formed you with intention, that He knew you before you were even born. His desire for you isn't based on how well you perform or how few mistakes you've made. It is rooted in His love, which is unshakable and unchanging. And then the enemy wants you to believe that your past defines you. He will remind you of every mistake, every failure, every regret, hoping that you'll believe those things are who you are. But God looks at you and sees His child. He sees someone He created for a purpose. He sees someone who is redeemed, forgiven, and covered by His grace. The moment you allow God's truth to be louder than the enemy's lies, you begin to walk in freedom. You begin to understand that your worth isn't something that can be lost, stolen, or diminished. It is given by God, and no force in hell can take it away. And then another trick of the enemy is making you feel like you are alone. He will convince you that no one understands, that no one sees you, that God has forgotten you. But God's desire for you is constant. He has never taken His eyes off you. Even in your lowest moments, He has been there. Even when you turned away, He never stopped calling you back. He desires a relationship with you, not because He needs you, but because He loves you. That love is not like human love that changes with circumstances. It is eternal, unwavering, and never dependent on anything you do or don't do. In May, when you realize how deeply God desires you, it changes everything. You stop looking for validation from the world because you understand that you are already chosen by the Creator of the universe. You stop believing the lie that you are too broken to be used because you understand that God specializes in using the broken. You stop running from him and start running toward him because you finally see that his arms have always been open. The enemy will always try to shake your confidence, but when you are rooted in the truth of God's love, you become unshakable. You begin to live with boldness, with purpose, with the confidence that you are not forgotten, not rejected, not insignificant. You are wanted by God, and nothing can change that. Thanks for watching.